Good afternoon to you. It is now 3:06 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news with less than a day to go before the conclusion of the 2024 presidential election. Joining us at 3:30 this hour, Matthew Boyle from Breitbart News is here. He'll give us a look at what's going on across the country. Ned Ryan joins us at 4 o'clock from American Majority with an update on the granular data in the state of this race. From Pennsylvania at 5 o'clock, Cliff Maloney. That's the state where both Trump and Harris are now crisscrossing, looking for votes in the Keystone State. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. That's right. Kamala Harris is out in Pennsylvania today. Earlier, she was in Scranton, one of Joe Biden's many hometowns. And while she was there, she tried to get yet another chant going.
The vote. Let's get out 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 the vote. Let's win.
Yep, that's what it sounded like. A lot of enthusiasm at that rally. And if you're looking for any indicators whatsoever on what's going to happen tomorrow, well, I've got a couple from which to draw. One of them is that Kamala Harris's campaign has just decided in the last 24 hours to abandon attacking Trump as Hitler. No more. They're not doing it anymore. No more name calling. In fact, they can't mention Trump at all. No more mentioning Trump. In the last 24 hours, they've stopped mentioning him. Now, remember, what has the strategy been for the last 2 weeks? He's Hitler. He's a fascist. His supporters are garbage. He's going to imprison us. He's going to drone strike us. He's going to get the military to shoot Democrats. He's going to put people in camps. You know, right? The hysterical, out-of-control rhetoric of the last few weeks. Here's Kamala Harris in her closing argument on the lawn of the White House.
We know who Donald Trump is. He is the person who stood at this very spot nearly 4 years ago and sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol to overturn the will of the people in a free and fair election. That he knew he lost.
As her rich, bitter supporters bray in agreement. Angry. Getting out the torches and pitchforks. Angry at Trump. And so it's been a constant drumbeat of demonization towards Trump, saying that he's an extremist and that extremists support him and that he has an enemies list.
Donald Trump has told us his priorities for a second term. He has an enemies list of people he intends to prosecute.
Just like Kamala and Joe Biden.
He says that one of his highest priorities is to set free the violent extremists who insulted those law enforcement officers on January 6th.
She can't even speak. Yeah, no, to give pardons to people who've had the entire government thrown at them for walking into the People's Capitol building on January 6th of 2021. So Kamala Harris saying that this is extremism, that's who Trump is. Trump's going to use the military against people.
Donald Trump intends to use the United States military against American citizens who simply disagree with him.
False. It's just a lie. So that's the tenor of her campaign these last few weeks. It turns out it's not working. It turns out, and it's crystal clear to those of us who are observing this from the outside, that was a disaster. That was a disaster. And on top of that, of course, you had President Biden come out and say that Donald Trump's supporters are, quote, garbage last week, which, of course, led to one of the finest political masterstrokes that any of us has ever seen, as President Trump climbed inside of a garbage truck and conducted a press conference from the window of said garbage truck. And then, in fact, has started the trend of people wearing safety vests, orange reflective safety vests, as a demonstration of support for President Trump and the people who support him. That's actually going on. And so here's what we now know. Kamala has made a last-second strategy shift. No more Hitler, no more garbage, at least for now. Kamala campaign is instead giving being nice a try. Yamiche Alcindor, is a dedicated left-winger, acts as a journalist, says the following. A senior Harris campaign official notes that Harris's East Lansing, Michigan rally today, that was yesterday now, was the first rally since Kamala Harris became the Democratic presidential candidate where she did not mention Trump by name. The strategy is, quote, closing fully positive, the official said. Closing fully positive. Fox News additionally has a story on the subject saying Harris didn't mention Trump's name during a rally for the first time as candidate. Vice President Kamala Harris didn't mention the name of her opponent, former President Donald Trump, for the first time in her campaign rallies while hitting stops in Michigan on Sunday, just 2 days before Election Day. She made 4 campaign stops across the battleground state without mentioning Trump's name as she looked to close out her campaign for president on a, quote, positive note. The vice president ended Sunday with a rally at Michigan State University's Jamison Fieldhouse in East Lansing, where she sought to contrast her optimistic tone with what she described as the darker message of her Republican opponent. And I should point out, by the way, the media are dutifully carrying Kamala's water on this. All of the broadcast networks, morning shows, all of their stupid left-wing legacy news outlets, they're all running with the Trump ends campaign on dark note, Kamala ends on optimistic one. That, too, is a lie. As President Trump has very much offered a very optimistic tone in the waning hours of this election. But it is clear that what's happening here is their strategy wasn't working. It turns out demonizing Trump and attempting to get people to hate him more, tearing him down as a substitution for having a real positive vision political campaign isn't working. You do not change your strategy in the final 48 hours if you have a working campaign strategy. You don't. If 5 and out keeps working, keep on throwing that pass. It's getting you to the goal line. But that's not what they're doing. They're switching everything up now at this last moment in the hopes that maybe they can pull the wool over your eyes and pretend now like they're the unity campaign, that they're the positive vision campaign. Kamala Harris, as I mentioned, was just in Scranton, Pennsylvania, just an hour or so ago. And while she was there, once again, didn't mention Trump by name, but is now casually referring to him as, quote, the other guy.
Spirit of what we are doing, and over these last, this whole era of this other guy, what it's done with all that.
This whole era of the other guy, she says, as if she hasn't been in the White House these last 4 years.
What it's done with all that talk that's been about trying to have us point fingers at each other.
Yeah, the same woman who was just saying that my political opponent is going to lock up American citizens, target them with the military. He's like Hitler. It's a Nazi rally. Her administration, her boss, saying that Trump supporters are garbage. Yeah, we don't want to point fingers and be divisive. Which presidential candidate has been shot in the head this cycle? Does anybody remember? Does anybody remember? What did these assassins think of President Trump? What did they think of him? What did the guy who was lying in wait in the bushes in Florida think? Well, it's crystal clear. He expressed his views online, like so many do. And he said, democracy's on the ballot. He put a bumper sticker on the back of his car saying that he supports Biden and Harris. His views were crystal clear. And his animus was motivated by the talking points that he heard from the White House. How do I know that? He's repeating them. He's repeating the same talking points that have come out of the mouths of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And so in these final 24 hours, she's saying, well, somebody in her campaign is saying, we've got to run on a unity message. We've got to be positive right now. President Trump, though, is ending this campaign on a very positive note. A very positive. And if you paid any attention to his actual rallies, to what it sounds like, sure, you can pick the moments where he goes after the radical left. You can pick the moments where he rightly blames Kamala Harris for what she's done to this country. Heck, the end of this campaign has included the message that Kamala broke it, Trump can fix it. That's one of their final statements. And you'll notice that they haven't actually changed it much. They've been sticking with it because it's been successful. And just like any political campaign, you measure the guy who's in office and you offer an alternative. And right now, Kamala Harris is in office and things are going poorly. So it makes sense that President Trump would critique that. But here's one of his closing ads. Take a listen to this. This is a cast of characters that just a few short years ago you couldn't have imagined coming together to support a singular political campaign in the United States of America. You'll hear voices including President Trump's, Tulsi Gabbard's, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Nicole Shanahan, his running mate, Democrat, J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate, Vivek Ramaswamy, and not too long ago, a darling of the green energy left, Elon Musk. All together in one video, one piece of audio here, supporting President Trump.
What will we do with this moment? How will we be remembered? Look at the opportunities before us.
This election really isn't about the left versus the right. It's about we, the people, choosing our government and the choice between freedom versus tyranny.
Nobody has a chronic disease burden like we have. Why are we allowing this to happen to our children? Ultimately, the only thing that will save our country is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other.
What is going on here is deeper than politics. It is deeply spiritual. We are being called to rise above the hatred and the fear and the evil.
We need to remember above and beyond that we must love our neighbors, that we must treat other people as we hope to be treated.
You want to be a rebel? You want to be a hippie? You want to stick it to the man? Show up on your college campus and try calling yourself a conservative.
America is going to reach heights that it has never seen before. The future is going to be amazing!
Don't you want healthy children? Don't you want a president that's going to make America healthy again?
I come to you today as a former Democrat. I will be a first-time Trump voter tonight.
The people dreamed this country, and it's the people who are making America great again.
A dive into the early voting numbers coming up. This thing ain't over until it's over. But I got to say, you really should have a lot of positive energy right now based on the data that we're seeing coming out. And that energy should guide you to fight to get every one of your last family and friends out to vote tomorrow on Election Day to get this thing across the finish line. The Trump campaign has released a memo in just the last few hours here that details some of the early voting data that they're looking at. And the subject line on this is the Democrat turnout problem heading into Election Day. It comes from a guy called Tim Saylor, who is the grassroots targeting and chief data consultant for the Trump campaign. And Tim writes this: with early voting closed and Election Day on the horizon, Democrats are facing a massive turnout deficit. In every single battleground state, we see President Trump and Republicans outperforming elections past in absentee ballots and early votes cast. As we dive deeper into the data, Democrats are facing a precipitous decline in urban turnout, according to their own data experts. And we are tracking an uptick in rural turnout. Obama's former campaign manager, Jim Messina, said on MSNBC that the early vote numbers are a little scary. Take a listen. Here's Jim Messina saying that very thing.
Biggest concern right now if you're the Harris team?
Well, look, I think it's a couple things. The early vote numbers are a little scary, and you and I have been texting back and forth. Republicans didn't do what they did last time. Last time Trump said don't early vote, and so they didn't. Republicans do have an advantage in early vote numbers. When the early vote come in, it's going to look a little bit different than 2020, and that's scary. But when you kind of dig into the numbers that I care the most about are two blocks, women voters and young voters. And those two voting blocks are coming big, Jen. Women voters make up 55% of the early voters. And in the past 10 days, young voters in these battleground states are coming out in what looks to be, for early votes, historic numbers. And that.
Okay, so, and by the way, just to give you to rain on his parade a little bit, women represented a higher percentage of the early vote back in 2020 than they do right now. They did. Back to the memo here from the Trump campaign. What Mr. Messina is downplaying is that the numbers are a lot scarier for Democrats. According to NBC News, President Donald J. Trump has a 16-point lead, 56-40, among voters who plan to cast their ballot on Election Day. Obama's chief campaign strategist and CNN political commentator David Axelrod told CNN there are no guarantees that voters will turn out on Election Day for Vice President Harris. Democrats are spinning themselves and reporters by claiming that their voters will turn out on Election Day when the polls show otherwise. And most importantly, that's asking Democrat voters to do something they have absolutely no history of doing. If Democrats who historically vote ahead of Election Day haven't been motivated to show up for Kamala yet, why do we expect them to show up tomorrow? President Donald J. Trump is going into Election Day stronger than he has in any previous election. And if patriots across the country keep the momentum and turnout as expected on Election Day, we will be swearing in President Trump in January. And then they run down all of the early battleground state voting data. And they point out Arizona, urban turnout is dramatically down. Female turnout is down. Rural turnout is up. Georgia, urban turnout, way down. Female turnout, down. Rural turnout, up. Michigan, urban turnout, down. Female turnout, down. Rural turnout, that is, up. North Carolina, it's the same. Nevada, urban and female turnout, down. Pennsylvania, urban and female turnout, down. Wisconsin, urban and female turnout is down. Those are the critical states. The Trump campaign releasing the data today, demonstrating some swagger heading into Election Day. They say the key now is Republican voters have to do their job. So you have to vote so Trump can fight. Those are the next steps. Joining us next, Matthew Boyle from Breitbart News. He'll give us his latest. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 3:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're all making sense of the news. We've got Ned Ryan coming up at 4 o'clock from American Majority. We'll talk to him about the state of the race. We'll do a granular dive into the data. Cliff Maloney gives us the perspective from the Keystone State of Pennsylvania at 5 o'clock. Could be the key to the whole election. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We're always looking for what to look for as the election approaches. One of the things I'm looking at is that D.C. has boarded up already. They're boarding up all the shops. The sandwich shops, the potbellies are being boarded up. Now, why would you board up a potbelly in anticipation of Republican rioting? I don't see any Republicans breaking potbelly windows. I don't think that's what they're getting ready for. My next guest has been looking at all of this really closely, too. I want to find out what he's obsessed with. Matthew Boyle is here. He's a Washington bureau chief for Breitbart News, and he joins us now. Matt, great to talk to you as always, sir.
Yeah, you bet, Vance. Great to be here.
What are you watching, Matt?
A lot of different stuff. We're just constantly scouring over data, trying to figure out which way this is going to break.
Yeah.
And the thing I would say, I'm not in the predictions game. I think predictions are useless, frankly, right? But what I will say is that there's a lot of good signs out there for Donald Trump and for Republicans, and all the signs are there. All the fundamentals are there for what would possibly be a major Trump victory tomorrow, right? So we'll see. It all comes down to turnout from all the different sides.
Yeah.
But Ultimately, at the end of the day, the fundamentals of what we saw in the 2016 campaign when polls, and frankly the 2020 campaign, when polls vastly underestimated Donald Trump and undercounted his support, and he way overperformed his polls. There's a lot of signs of that in this election. But nothing's over until it's over. Yes. And frankly, that people need to turn out to vote. I'm looking at early vote across the board in all the battleground states. I'm looking at demographic data. I'm looking at polling data. I'm looking at, I'm talking to the various campaigns. I talk to Democrats. I talk to Republicans. Yeah. And I'll tell you that what the picture that I've been able to pull together here ahead of the election is that, again, it very well could break towards Donald Trump in a big way. It could also break to Kamala. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying she can't lose the election. They call it the blue wall for a reason. It's a wall. Trump has to break it down. But where it stands going into Election Day, it's very hard to see Kamala Harris winning any of these so-called Sun Belt states, right? Like North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, all moving away from her, with the exception of Nevada, though that's really close, right? Yes. Like it's really close out there. And it would be historic if Trump flips Nevada because he didn't win it in 2016 or 2020. So the Sun Belt states are moving away from her, and the Rust Belt states are tight, but Kamala Harris will have to win all three if Donald Trump wins the Sun Belt states, and yes. Donald Trump just has to win one of them.
So let's dwell on Nevada for a moment, because I think that's a good example of where we might find some inspiration. There's a reporter there who's not a fan of Trump, but he's considered the lead reporter in Nevada. His name's John Ralston. And he's been saying for throughout the early voting period that the Republicans are doing shockingly well in Nevada. Yes. Now, he just came out with his prediction about half an hour or so ago and indicated that he thinks Kamala Harris is going to win Nevada by just 0.3 percentage points. He has it at 48.5 to 48.2. Now, Matt Boyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but Nevada was expected to be a state that was pretty safely in her corner. If it's that close, do you find that bodes good things for Trump?
It does, and frankly, it's the furthest left of the battleground states. So technically speaking, if Ralston's prediction ends up bearing out, which, by the way, the guy has a good track record. I'll give him that, right? Like, and I respect him a lot. I read his stuff, frankly, all the time when I'm trying to figure out what's going on in Nevada. I even sent him a message saying that I'm a fan of his work, right? Like, so I disagree with his prediction. Yeah. We'll see what happens, right? Like, but it's a razor-thin prediction one way or the other. And frankly, for it to be right, Kamala Harris needs every break in the world between now and when the ballots are done, because Nevada's kind of weird in that they have the election day tomorrow, but then they continue to accept some ballots after election day. It's kind of strange. But the point is that Kamala Harris needs everything to break her way to win by a little over 0.25%, right? Like, so look, I don't know if he's going to end up being right or not on this one. Who knows? But the point is that if it's that close in Nevada, then Donald Trump votes very well back east in places like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania.
And Ralston predicted a 4-point Biden victory back in 2020. It was just a 2.4-point victory, meaning he was off by 1.6. In other words, like he could very much get this wrong. And given the fact that he assessed it so close, it's very possible still for Trump to win Nevada. Okay, let me ask about the strategy that you're sensing out of the two campaigns. And you can take them in whatever order you like. But one thing I've noticed about each campaign, Kamala Harris has all of a sudden stopped attacking Trump. She doesn't call him a fascist. She doesn't even name him. There's no references to his supporters being garbage. This is just in the last 48 hours. She's not talking about the military being used by Trump to shoot Americans and throw them in camps. None of that, the last 48 hours. And then today I'm noticing on these stages that Trump is standing on in Pennsylvania, he's surrounded by women for Trump signs. I see pink women for Trump signs everywhere. What do you make of the closing strategies of these two campaigns?
Well, those are two very astute observations, Vince, going into Election Day. I think that it shows you that David Plouffe and Jen O'Malley Dillon, the top campaign strategists, about the Kamala thing, about her dropping mentions of Trump altogether in the last 2 days, which is true. Like, that's, based off what we're seeing, that she's dropped that nonsense. That when they were saying late last week that everybody was late-breaking deciders going double digits to Kamala, they were lying. Right? Like, they didn't put out any evidence of their claim, and the media dutifully reported it. But the fact is that always watch what they do. Don't just listen to what they say, right? Like in the actions of the Kamala Harris campaign or the campaign of a losing campaign, right? Like, I mean, they are behaving like they are losing this election. They keep changing their strategy all the way through. They've been changing it throughout the course of the election. It was just a few days ago that she was supposedly doing her closing, 1 week out speech at the White House Ellipses on the National Mall, where, in front of tens of thousands of people. Not that hard for a Democrat to draw a crowd like that in D.C., by the way. But the point is that she was, lambasting Trump as like a wannabe dictator, right? Like, I mean, the terminology she was using there, and now she's just not even talking about it altogether. So it's abundantly clear that she's afraid that this race is slipping away from her. And again, that gets back to the strategy that we're talking about here about electoral college strategy to pass the 270 votes. Again, it all runs through the Rust Belt and through the Blue Wall states. Now, again, it's called the Blue Wall for a reason. It's going to be tough to win for Trump, but he's got to flip just one, and she has to hold all three. So that's the question. She's decided to park herself in Pennsylvania all day today for the final day of the election. I find that interesting, right? Like, so she's not venturing back to Wisconsin or Michigan. Maybe she thinks those states are gone. Maybe she thinks they're locked for her. I don't know. Like, but she's not going to North Carolina or Nevada or Arizona today or Georgia. Right? She's in Pennsylvania. That's where the race comes down to. Now, as for the Trump side, I think you're also right. Like, I saw that he's going to have Megyn Kelly out there. That's a fascinating development, especially after their history in the 2016 election in Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh later tonight. You're going to see Trump close it down in Grand Rapids, Michigan tonight, just like he did in the last two elections. It's pretty amazing, by the way, 3 straight presidential elections with the same Republican nominee. I think this is like a once-in-a-lifetime thing for whatever it's worth for everybody out there. So take note of where you are and, like, remember these moments, because we're never going to have anything like this ever again, right? Yeah. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing to see Donald Trump, a generational figure out there on the ballot. It's just truly historic. But I do think that the Trump team feels very confident about winning men. And they're trying to eat into Kamala's advantages with women, and they feel confident. I was talking to some very senior campaign people very close to the president and vice president throughout the day today, and they feel very confident about winning, doing better with married women, right? Like, and that might be a distinction worth watching here going into the election among the demographics. So you may see pretty high turnout among women, and you see a lot of people talking about that in the early vote. But what kind of women are voting? Are they married women? Are they unmarried women? Yes. Right? Like, married women might break more for the Republican than the Democrat, and that might be a problem for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, that's right. And I was just talking about a moment ago. There's a lot has been said about the early vote turnout among women, but it is still a couple of percentage points lower than the share that women represented in 2020. And I'm not hearing almost any news outlet talk about that. They leave that out of that context out as they talk about this. But for President Trump's part, it's crystal clear to me that they are doing the best they can, as you point out, to eat into any advantage that Kamala Harris might have among women. In fact, over the weekend, and when President Trump spoke in Virginia, he brought on stage the entire Roanoke College women's swim team that supports him. A bunch of these young female swimmers all standing on stage saying we have to keep men out of women's sports. President Trump has been also emphasizing the threats to women that are posed by illegal foreign nationals who've attacked women here in the United States. So the closing notes of this campaign, to include what we'll hear from, I think, Megyn Kelly tonight in Pittsburgh, as you mentioned, are all about why President Trump is going to be a great president for the women of America.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, again, but the deciding demographic, it all comes back to, there was a Democrat pollster, I think it was Celinda Lake, right? Like, so she was doing an interview, I want to say it was in late August with, or early September with Mark Halperin. And I'll never forget this quote, right? Like, she said, it was burned into my mind when I watched her say it, right? Like, and Celinda Lake knows her stuff. She's a Democrat pollster. She's been worked around in the industry for a long time. I respect the heck out of these people, right? Like, I disagree with their politics, but I respect her and I listen to her. She said something along the lines of the mission for Kamala Harris to win the election is she has to energize women more than they tick off men or something like that. She said men need to be sullen but not mutinous. And I think that what's happened over the course of this election is men have become mutinous. Right? Like, I think you were seeing big numbers among men and men may swing the election, right? Like, so everybody talks about women voters, right? Like, and yes, that's what this final thing is all about. But men might decide it in the end, and you're seeing that with black men, you're seeing it with Hispanic men, you're seeing it with white men, right? Like, and so, frankly, those demographic questions may decide who the next president of the United States is, and so we'll see. We got 24 hours.
So
right?
Matt Boyle, again, you've been with Breitbart News for many years. You're very familiar with your audience and their politics. And when it comes to Election Day turnout, what we're all waiting to see is to what extent Republicans have, in the nomenclature of election analysts, cannibalized their own support for the early vote. Like, so how many people went and early voted who would otherwise show up on Election Day? And will that mean a depressed turnout among Republicans, and particularly men, on Election Day? But my sense is that there's still a huge percentage of Republican voters out there, Matt Boyle, who have decided that they're ride or die Election Day voters and plan on showing up tomorrow. What is your sense of it?
Yes, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but I would say it's more in the column of the voters who have voted early on the Republican side. For the most part, on the whole, right? Like, and I'm being very general here, right? Like, have been your lower propensity voters, right? So you hear political consultants, they talk about people in terms of 0 out of 4, 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4, and 4 out of 4 voters, okay? 4 out of 4 voters are people like me. They vote in every election, even when it isn't competitive, right? Like, they show up and they vote in every little primary and everything like that, right? They follow every little twist and turn in politics, right? Like, so on and so forth. 3 out of 4 voters are ones that vote in most of the elections in that place. The ones that the political campaigns are targeting to try to get to come out and vote early, both sides, by the way, the Republicans and the Democrats, are the 0s, 1s, and 2s, right? 0s are people that weren't even registered before this election. There's a lot of people out there like that, right? Like, the political campaigns have identified a lot of them in all across the battleground states that they think are more favorable to their side than not. But they also want the 1s and 2s, the people that you don't know if you can count on them to actually show up on Election Day. They might not vote because they forget that it's the election, or they aren't paying attention to the news or whatever, but they're registered and they might vote every 2 or 3 elections, right? Like, and so what you want those folks coming out. From what we can tell, based off of the data, and I'm talking to a lot of the different turnout folks and so on and so forth in a lot of these places, and there are a lot more specific numbers that I'm going to give out on the air that I get from these guys, but I'll tell you that generally speaking, the Republicans are confident that the vast majority of the people that are turning out early, yeah, they've cannibalized a little bit, but the vast majority of the people that are turning out early are their 0s, 1s, and 2s, and that they've got 3s and 4s in reserve coming on Election Day.
Right.
Like, and so we'll see if that theory of the case is right. Like, this is a whole new novel way of doing things for the Republicans, where they have guys like Turning Point Action, Charlie Kirk, and what they're doing, and Cliff Maloney in Pennsylvania with Pennsylvania Chase, and Elon Musk, and all of these different groups, outside groups doing it. And there's plenty of other ones too, right? Ralph Reed of Faith and Freedom's doing it. You're seeing there's tons of different other ones. I'm forgetting a bunch of them. Ned Ryan at American Majority Action, I know he's doing a bunch of stuff. So the point is that all of these different folks are doing this, and usually this has been done by the campaigns, right? Like, so it's not being done by the campaign this time, kinda. So it's novel, but I think that everything I'm hearing is that it's working.
We'll see. I guess we'll see. And by the way, Matt just teased literally all of my guests coming up on the program. So thank you for that. Matthew Boyle with Breitbart News. Always good to talk to you, sir.
You bet.
All right, let's go to the phones. That's where we find Leo in Colorado on line 1. Leo, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. I didn't hear the last 30 minutes, but I'm going to go and I'm going to wag it. I was talking about with Corey about our military, and as a retiree, that's a slam to our military members, because they know they cannot take arms up against Americans under the Posse Comitatus Act. It has to be severe. And for her to say that, she's inciting violence. And
what Leo's referring to, so people know, is Kamala claimed that Trump would take the military and target Americans, shoot Americans.
Yes. Thank you for that clarification. And the American, our troops will not do that.
Of course. And Trump wouldn't do it either. Trump's not going to tell the military to attack Americans. It's the most ridiculous thing you could possibly say.
It is, and she should be reprimanded some way, shape, or form for that. But I also want to say here in Colorado, I voted last Monday. There was people in the droves coming out and voting. It was crazy. I didn't see that the last election out here.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I had a dream that he won all the electoral. Oh my God, how many are there? I had to look it up.
I don't know what just happened to your audio, but I heard your dream and that he won all the electoral votes. May that have biblical truth to it. I really appreciate that call, Leo. Hold on.